The Pollard home in Dundalk. Well, first of all, I want to apologize for the sound on this piece of video I've just done. I realized I had forgotten to plug in the microphone. Well, the mics on my little camera sound like you're talking through a tin can. And I started to throw it away and do it all over again. And then it dawned on me that the daggone thing sounds like our old RCA Victrola that we listened to all our music on back in the 30s before we got our big Air King radio. And so I decided, well, it might be nice if the kids hear that. If some of the younger folks happen to watch this. The year was 1919. Charles Frederick Pollard was 20 years old. Ruby Ethel Williams was 21. They were married in Waycross, Georgia, where they lived just on the outskirts of Waycross at Hebbardville. They went to Savannah, Georgia, the big city, for their honeymoon. And I have pictures of them posing in graveyards and all kinds of places where they stopped and visited with some family relatives, I think, in the graveyard. Anyway, Dad was working at the railroad shops in Waycross because Waycross was a railroad town. He served an apprenticeship and became a machinist there. In later years, they tried their hand at farming and this, that, and the other. And finally, Dad wound up opening up a machine shop in Waycross where he repaired rail cars and locomotives for the company that was logging out the Okefenokee Swamp. But the logging company moved on down to the other end of the swamp. And times were hard in Georgia because Georgia had just about been totally destroyed by the Civil War, and it was still a long ways from being the industrial town that it was before the war. So the Depression hit there before it hit anywhere else, almost. In the Deep South, the Depression was going on in 1920, 21, 22. The logging company moved on, so Dad's business wasn't doing well. And his older sister, Marion, sent him a letter from Baltimore telling him, Fred, come on to Baltimore. There's good jobs paying good money. Well, Dad hopped the freight train, went from Waycross to Baltimore, and was instantly hired at Bethlehem Steel for his machine shop experience, where he was a machinist. And they stayed there for about a year, but the company, that company was paying them off in chits rather than money. And they had to take the chits to the bank where they paid 10% for cashing them. Or they could spend them in the company store where the prices were 20% higher than anywhere else. And he got tired of that pretty quick. And he went looking for another job. Well, he got a job at Western Electric in Baltimore, where he was a machinist and toolmaker. And then the Depression hit. The Western Electric kept him on. They liked him. He was a good machinist. They liked him. And he was a hard worker. So they kept him there working one day a week, mowing the grass. Just something to keep him from starving to death. Well, Dad figured out a way to make a buck. They were living in rental houses in St. Helena, just on the edge of Baltimore, right beside the hometown of Dundalk. And he repaired the houses for the man that owned them to pay his rent. So he had one day a week's work and a little money coming in from as free rent. They had an insurance policy, which they cashed, was worth $800. And they bought a piece of land with it. They bought an acre of land out at a place called Dundalk Farms, just northeast of Dundalk. It was part of Merritt Farm, and the farmer who owned it split it up into acre lots. Some people bought 2 acres, some bought 1. Dad bought 1 on Robinwood Road. Well, He didn't have any money. So he built a rowboat, and he rowed out to what we called the sunken barges, which was actually sunken sailing ships along the coast of Colgate Creek and Turner Station and Dundalk. He would row out there, rip a bunch of boards off the tops of them ships, load them in a skiff, row them back to St. Helena, put them in a cart, and wheel the cart over to the property, their Dundalk Farms on Robinwood Road. He did that every day for quite some time, and my brother Charlie, who was then, I don't know, maybe 13 years old, helped him. And they began building a house very slowly because, like I say, they didn't have any money. But it was all built out of scrap lumber. But it was good lumber. Those ships had cypress siding on the cabins, and they had heart yellow pine from Georgia and the southern states for decks, and lots of beams inside them for floor joists and rafters and all of that. So the lumber was free for the most part. They did buy some lumber from what they call lumber yards in Baltimore, where when they were tearing down what was left of the wooden buildings, which had been outlawed in Baltimore, to be replaced by brick and cement buildings, they were able to buy that stuff really cheap, along with the plumbing that came out of them, whatever plumbing there was. And by then, things were moving on. It was about 1932 or so, 3 maybe. And slowly but surely, a little 4-room house began going up, setting up on concrete block pilasters, with the wind blowing underneath of it. No finished floors, only subfloors with wind blowing up through the cracks. No insulation. A little bit of sheetrock about halfway up the walls between the front bedroom and Mom and Dad's bedroom at first. And finally, about 1934, I came along. Of course, I was the apple of everybody's eye, I guess. I had Charlie, 14 years older than me, Dot, 12 years older than me, and Madge, 6 years older than me. So I was kind of the apple of everybody's eye, according to what they said and what I remember. But Dad kept building on the house. I remember the outhouse out back. There was an antenna on top of the house, stood up about 10 feet above the peak of the house. And a wire went from it to a pole attached to the outhouse. And we had a huge Air King radio in there. Came from Sears and Roebuck, I think. And it had a speaker about 24 inches in diameter, so it had a deep bass, really fine sound to it. And I think they paid more money for it than they could afford, but anyway, it was short wave, middle wave, and long wave. So we could hear broadcasts from the British Airways. We could hear Berlin, France. And we got a lot of news from those. Some of the European stations were broadcasting more or less broken English. And I remember going out into the yard, which was almost all weeds. There was very little grass around. And I remember when Mom and Dad planted 2 pear trees, 3 pear trees, 2 apple trees, 2 peach trees, 2 cherry trees, and a weeping willow tree, which Mom wanted. Had a storm come through, blew down one of the apple trees, blew down one of the cherry trees, which when it came back up, but when it did, it was a wild cherry tree. It wasn't cooking cherries, so I guess it had been spliced. I think I was probably a spoiled kid. Everybody, I must have been a hell of a liar because everybody said I had one really wild imagination. So I think probably that was true. So not much has changed. I guess I'm still a pretty good liar. But I have learned to try to tell the truth. But every now and then a lie slips in, so you can't trust everything I say. Dad's brother, Cecil, that we called Satch, coming from the nickname Satchel Ass, who lived in Baltimore. And Satch was a crane operator. And he made a lot of money. He did really well. He operated the big, tall cranes in the shipyards, and they paid him well. And Satch always had a fairly new Packard automobile, sometimes a Buick. But I'll never forget one time he come to the house with an Austin. Dad, and a little yellow and black Austin. Ugly? Damn, it was ugly. But Dad said, "Hey, Cease, is that car any good?" He said, "Hell no, but it's cute, ain't it?" Well, Cecil was kind of the family clown, and I think probably he had expected clownishness out of him. So he was that way all his life. He drank way too much when he was grown. He married a woman, and they lived in Baltimore, and Grace was kind of wild. She had a couple of boyfriends from time to time, nearly drove him crazy. They finally separated, and he hooked up with a lady and lived in a back alley apartment in Baltimore, because he never had any money. He drank it all up. But he was a nice guy. So anyway, that's where a big part of my life came from. And I got a lot of stories to tell about things I did, things my family did, things other people did. And stories on friends. Some of them are good, some not so hot, maybe. Well, after Dad and Charlie finished off the upstairs, adding a couple bedrooms up there. 2 rooms on the back of the house, one to be a new kitchen and the other one a bedroom, to make 3 bedrooms, and turn what was the old kitchen into a dining room. You know, the house was all fully sheetrocked and painted and wallpapered and so on. The upstairs was finished off with a nice stairway going up. 3 bedrooms upstairs. Big dormers added into the roof, which was another whole story. Maybe sometime I'll tell that. And it was a front porch added. And the front porch is what this is kind of about. Because Mom had about 6 or 7 rocking chairs out there and a porch swing. And in the summertime, back in them days, there wasn't any air conditioning. Everybody did their cooking in the kitchen and heated the house up. And the houses were hot inside late in the afternoon. So everybody got out and went for a walk. Well, we had all kind of neighbors in the neighborhood. We had Germans that had out on Adolf Hitler and the Nazis and came to the United States. And there were Poles, and we had some Italians in the neighborhood. We had a couple Jewish families, one of which owned a little store in Dundalk that had sold Mom and Dad groceries on credit all during the worst part of the economy. And Dad worried about it, but Mr. Karsh told him, "Don't worry about it, Fred. This depression is going to end before so very long, and you'll be able to pay me. It'll be all right. You can pay a little interest, and that'll make everybody happy." Well, these people all came around, sat on the porch. Sometimes there'd be 8, 10 people sitting around there on the porch. And man, did we hear stories. Stories from the Germans about what went on when Hitler took power, and from the Jews, and the Poles, and the Italians, and about Mussolini and all of that. And I'm going to try to get around and tell some of all of this as best I can remember it anyway. It's been a long time ago. And what everybody thought about it when the Japs bombed Pearl Harbor. So there's a lot of stories there to tell. And of course I got a lot of stories of my own sailing and working in the steel mills as a boy and being a machinist, learning to be a machinist. And all the work we did at Mars Machine Works, building wind tunnel models and sting adapters and all of that stuff to go in space, rocket ships and lander parts to land on the moon, to land on Mars, a scoop to scoop up Mars dirt to analyze it and send the information back to Earth. Stuff that we worked on there at Mars Machine Works, and stuff that I'm certainly proud of. So I'm going to try to tell all of that here. And I hope it will be of interest to other people. I don't know. You never know about things like this. Everybody might be too interested in playing with their cell phones. I don't know. But anyhow, I'm going to try to tell it. So join me if you can. I think probably that's about all I'm going to tell here. And then I'll pick up again with another story. I hope that every story I tell from here on will sort of originate out of on the Pollard front porch. Let us talk.